Welcome to Making Sense of the Madness. We got a great show lined up for you today. We've got former CIA officer Kevin Shipp. He is also the author of Twilight of the Shadow Government, How Transparency Will Kill the Deep State and the Mockingbird Media. This is going to be a banger because there's so much I've liked with the Trump administration, and we're expecting so much out of them. However, right now, foreign policy seems to be something that could put off a powder keg. I want to get his take on all of it. Buckle up and get ready to make sense of the madness. And we are back. Kevin, thank you so much for joining us. Now,
thanks for having me.
It has been probably the most prolific 2 weeks of any administration I've ever lived through. Whether you love it, hate it, whether you even believe what the media is saying about things like the cutting of spending of U.S. aid, etc. You know, my niece is, I've got two nieces, they're 14 and 15, but I help take care of them. And she's doing current events now. And like one of the first things she talks about is how they're pulling people out of churches and schools and they're deporting them. And then I have to explain to her, no, that's just part of it. They're deporting them from everywhere. And they just flew a bunch of them in, some of them criminals. And I had to, she knows I travel. I'm like, we literally paid, and I was on planes where we stopped them. And she was like blown away by this, first timer on that. And then she talked about the FBI agents that had been fired. And I said, let's pull it back. And I go, just so you know, and she'd never heard any of this. I go, that agency, there are people within that over the years that probably were involved in the murder of MLK, RFK, and JFK. And her eyes, and she's like, well, I didn't know that. And I go, and we might, under this guy, actually be able to prove some of that in a meaningful way. So there's a lot of narrative out there. There's a lot of reality. What have you seen so far? I mean, you're a veteran intelligence agent. Another sweeping thing we need to talk about is we've never seen in the modern day anything like the intelligence community being stripped of their security clearances in this manner. And that's a huge move as well. So I said a lot there, Kevin. I'm going to let you go.
Yeah. In response to that, somebody pinched me. I think I'm dreaming. I've been trying to expose the CIA, what I call the shadow government, that the CIA essentially controls all three branches of our government, Congress, the judiciary, and the White House. And this has been going on for decades. And what people don't know, because the CIA keeps this from the media and keeps it from movies and other things, the CIA's done 81 interventions in foreign elections. And of course, we know the JFK assassination, some revelations just came out where they found records over in Japan in the financial office that show that Oswald had a 201 file, which means he was being paid by the CIA as an asset. And Jack Ruby, it turns out, when he was in prison, was visited by Jolly Lewis West, who was the architect of MK Ultra. And after that meeting, Jack Ruby was mentally insane. He was diagnosed as mentally insane. We have Iran-Contra, the false flag intelligence in Iraq, 210,000 civilians, 431 Americans killed. On and on we go. Afghanistan, 176,000 civilians killed. Iran, 60,000, which resulted in the government that we have now, which is the chief sponsor of terrorism. And we could go on and on and on and on about the CIA's atrocities. And that's one of the prime reasons I wrote this book, is to let people know how bad, rogue, and unconstitutional this agency is in detail, so we can all start an avalanche of public demand for reform of the CIA.
So what are the expectations here? Because I got to admit, in the very beginning, they've been surpassed for me. I thought a lot of things were rhetoric. For instance, I thought it was Johnny nonsense that there'd be any possibility that the IRS would go by the wayside. But now, after seeing what's been done in rapid fashion, I don't know that that's the case, and I don't know that any necessarily sane person would be opposed to that. It's going to be hard to stomp that down on the general public if they hear they don't have to pay a federal income tax. At the same time, it hasn't been perfect. We're going to get into foreign policy later, but let's get into some of the good stuff. He has said we're getting the declassification on these assassinations. Now, this is stuff that even long before I was born, people have been studying and questioning. I would have liked to see Malcolm X in there. You mentioned Iran-Contra. I hope it goes in that direction, but I will certainly give them the gravitas of let's see what these dumps do and how they do shake it up, because you're going to see corruption at the highest levels. And I would also imagine that you're going to see the use of shell companies for the first time on a large scale level, where the public starts to understand this integration of the intel community and these large corporations to conspire. Right. So, number one, do you think everything we're going to get is real? It does, like everybody talks about Snowden, for instance, and he's the one that let us know that we were being spied on. Not if you were paying attention. We had Hepting versus AT&T. People knew about the Norris Insight systems. Carnivore promised they were already on the books. The big thing he said that concerned me is when he said he went into the documents, and instead of something that was just redacted and there's the real document, there was a completely fake document in another document's place. Mm-hmm. That's, again, something that is worrisome to a guy like me that's super skeptical. That's right. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, the first point is, if you remember when MK Ultra came out in the Church Committee hearings, torture and sexual abuse and drugging people without their knowledge as a way to try to make a Manchurian candidate or increase interrogation. When MK Ultra first came out, which was a horrific program, the CIA immediately, Richard Helms, the director of the CIA, immediately destroyed 10,000 records on MK Ultra before they could reach the Church Committee after their subpoenas and orders to provide it. So the CIA destroyed all the damning documents. Now, with the JFK assassination, the CIA is not going to kill a sitting president and engage in a domestic coup, which they did. They're not going to do that, and then they're not going to save the files down in some vault in CIA headquarters. No, they're going to destroy them immediately. Those files will never see the light of day. I hate to tell people that, but they won't. Now, why won't they release the other documents, and why the ones they released are they so heavily redacted? Which, if you know me, I'm really fed up with the redaction system, because they redact criminal activity and things they don't want people to know, not national security. But you wonder if in these files about JFK, MLK, and others, there may be personal information about the victim themselves that their family doesn't want released. That's not very flattering. And that would be a reason for them not to release those documents if it cast a bad light on MLK or JFK or something. And we know they both had, some checkered parts of their lives. So it's possible that that's what's in some of these documents, the FBI wiretaps of Martin Luther King and other things. So that's something that a lot of people haven't considered, why they're not releasing these. It's got nothing to do with JFK's murder, everything to do with kind of concealing both of the skeletons that were kind of in their closets. That's one possibility. I hope they release these. We demand they release them unredacted. And what could happen, and this is the encouraging part, what could happen, like the auditor over in Japan in the station who's going through CIA audit records, found a CIA employee file on Lee Harvey Oswald. If they release fully these documents, who knows? Maybe there's a little puzzle piece in there that the CIA missed, because it does that, and we may find some important information. The point is, release them all unredacted. This is a constitutional government run by the people. The government has no right to withhold this information, and it's even been opened up for declassification legally. And on top of that, so release them all, release them undocumented. The American people have the right to know this stuff. So when they come out, if they're redacted, that's not good enough. the demand needs to go back and say, no, you take these blackouts out of these documents, and you put these out in toto for people to see.
I totally agree. And I do think that there are the possibility also of people still being around that were assets or agents, maybe in their late 80s, early 90s, if they were recruited as a teenager. This certainly was a time period where if you were 18, 19, 20, you may have been utilized by those agencies. Maybe that's far-fetched, but at the same time, it's long overdue. And like I said, I want even more than that. For instance, you mentioned Iran-Contra. Now, in a lot of ways, that's the last time we've seen any quote-unquote criminal accountability within the executive on a large scale, and that's a long time ago, everybody. And to me, it was whitewashed in a lot of ways. You had some people that went to jail for a little while. A lot of them got commutes or pardons after the fact. They made it about Oliver North when even Lee Hamilton, who was on the Warren Commission, found his way right into Iran-Contra and helped head up the 9/11 Commission, also with Thomas Keane. Really quaint guy. He even admits in interviews that George H.W., ex-head of the CIA, Bush, had a larger role in that than was acknowledged by that commission.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And look, Oliver North, way to discourage the guy, became a millionaire. Got TV shows and radio shows and book deals. That's really how you discourage that thing. Here's my big concern. First of all, a lot of people also don't know the Israeli aspect, the plausible deniability circle, that they were the ones buying the weapons from the European nations and shipping them down. Mark Rich, really that intel connection of the Central Intelligence Agency, Mossad, etc. Is that not only did we not have accountability there, but Trump signed an executive order making the cartels, for instance, terrorist organization. Okay, who's running the cartels? Because I haven't seen any evidence that the CIA stopped running drugs and guns during that time period and after. So, you know what? I think that'll be a good break segment. When we come back, I want to get your expertise on that. The book is Twilight of the Shadow Government, How Transparency Will Kill the Deep State. You can get it on Amazon and all over the place. We are with Kevin Shipp. It is a banger of an episode. More making sense of the madness after this.
Everything you're showing us, Steve, I'm looking at it going, I want one of those. I want one of those. And I think you guys are too. So don't forget to go to the Patriot TV store and you can see all of Steve's Made in America shirts and just everything. Shirts, hats, socks, sunglasses, you name it, workout gear, you've got everything.
So we're going to bring some of our other people back again to show you some of the other items.
Okay.
And we keep changing so you get a good idea of what we carry.
Yeah, I mean,
exactly.
Look at the variety and look at the choices you have. Today's guest again was Steve Stern of the Flag Shirt Company. And again, they've been in business over 70 years. High quality products, fast delivery, and amazing customer service. So for any reason something doesn't fit, you can send it right back. And again, I'm going to say it one more time, the Patriot TV store. You've got to go to Patriot TV store and get your items now.
What do a neurosurgeon, a country artist, and a television and radio host have in common? They all saw the writing on the wall. Big banks sharing your financial information with big government. Join them as owners in Old Glory Bank, the pro-America online bank that protects your privacy, security, and liberty. Invest today at own.oldglorybank.com.
And we are back. Now, I went on a long, bloviated rant about drug running and the Central Intelligence Agency and the intel communities. What are your thoughts on that and Trump's executive order?
Well, what many people don't know is the CIA penetrated the DEA long ago. And as a matter of fact, there are CIA agents in the DEA, even at managerial levels. And I interviewed a well-known DEA agent who has done the recently released movie. It's on Amazon Prime, The Last Narc. People should watch that. Hector Carrera, I believe I got his last name correctly. I did an interview with Hector when I had my radio program, and one of the things Hector has come out and blown the whistle on is that the CIA had penetrated the DEA so badly that Hector had CIA agents working for him that he thought was DEA agents. And every time that they would get close to busting a drug kingpin in these cartels, the CIA would stop them and protect that cartel leader, because the CIA's claim was, well, we need the information that this guy's given us, so let him keep on trafficking drugs into the United States. They were doing that. They're still doing that, and they're still in the DEA. And that is something I hope the Trump administration, and I think they probably will look into.
So let's talk some good stuff till we get to some of the more concerning stuff for me. U.S. aid. Now, that has been a front for money laundering, corruption, intelligence, assets, front organizations, companies for a very, very long time. I think that is one of the reasons that we're getting temper tantrums, but it really does cut off a lot of the funding of these covert operations that aren't black and white. So can you kind of go through the history of that organization and how it's utilized in those manners?
Sure. What the CIA's favorite thing to do is to use a cutout so that it can cover its connection to some of these operations. It loves to use third parties, or in this case, create and use the USAID to fund covert programs that Congress doesn't approve funding for. So the CIA literally was using tax dollars without Congress's knowledge under USAID for CI covert operations. So they didn't have to report them, and they didn't have to report the budget. And of course, the Biden administration was using the USAID for perverted things like transgender operas in Colombia and all this other insane things that they chose because they're trying to push their culture on other countries, several other countries. They were funding, USAID was funding programs like that. So it's been corrupt, terrible. It's a CIA front that the CIA was using to engage in and pay for covert operations without having to get the consent of the president or Congress.
That is not the only mechanism for this as well. Obviously, the non-government organizations. I was even alarmed to see how many there were in the United States. I mean, pretty much, I think the number was 140 million. So one in every 2 to 3 people, there's an NGO. That's absolute insanity. They all can't be doing something good. I want everybody to kind of think about those numbers. So when we talk about that, some of that funding is obviously coming through U.S. aid. What are some of the other government organizations that they're funneling money to those NGOs through?
Well, if you remember, the Clinton Foundation is an NGO, and USAID was funding the Clinton Foundation and the dark stuff that they were doing. So NGOs, again, are a favorite way to launder money in operations without having to get congressional approval. So the CIA is the primary user of USAID, and of course, from the White House level, some of the woke programs that the USA tries to push on other countries. And they've been doing this for a long time, especially under Hillary Clinton. The State Department went to Ghana and they said, listen, we want you to push abortion on demand up until late term if you want to get any U.S. aid or funding or help. If you don't do that, then we're not giving you a dime. That is the kind of evil, wicked stuff they were trying to do. Drag queens and gender training in foreign schools, just trying to put that virus in these foreign countries as a way to mold them into what they thought they should be. Our government has no right doing that. as perverse as it is, doing that in other countries and helping them with starvation or some of the tragedies, for example, in Africa, are helping them with strings attached. They push these woke agendas, or we don't give them a dime. I mean, how dark is that?
It is extremely dark. And, you know, the subtitle of your book, where it talks about the Mockingbird media, some of the really alarming things that are coming to light, which I'm glad they are, but again, they're not picking up in the mainstream, are that USAID is also funding media organizations that are household names. The BBC, for people that don't understand, in Europe, you pay a tax to have the BBC, so they're already kind of taxpayer funded, much like NPR. That's a whole nother can of worms. I mean, again, when you're talking about programming, public or PBS is one where, like Sesame Street, went totally crazy during the COVID 1984 nightmare, and we're funding that overseas as well with their own Sesame Street. Most alarming one I've seen is the money to Reuters, where it says to actually socially engineer the public and deceive them in the header.
Yeah.
I mean, I want people to really think about that gravity, because all my pseudo-intellectual state college graduate friends, I know I'm a dropout, guys. I can read at a fifth grade level. It's a bad thing. They always go to Reuters or the Associated Press like they're the gold standard. Literally had a contract through our government organization to socially engineer and deceive the public. Kevin, can you kind of really get into that?
That is absolutely correct. Yes, everything you said is absolutely correct. And one of those organizations that USAID was funding is Politico, a left-leaning periodical publication that is constantly pounding on Trump supporters and pounding on conservatives. Well, lo and behold, Politico is being paid for through USAID funds to parrot what the shadow government deep state wants it to write and wants it to say. Politico right now has got to be freaking out, because this looks like the beginning of their end. But you want to talk about Mockingbird right in our face. The USAID is funding news outlets that are counter-conservative or counter-traditional America. And thank God they can no longer hide it.
Again, a lot of us knew this was going on, but when we talk about, you know, a capitalist society or a meritocracy, it's really hard to compete in the quote unquote independent media when they're literally funding hundreds of millions of dollars into organizations that really, you know, when you look at the target audience of kind of the boomer crowd, has no idea who they are and only really finds out about them through the Fox Newses, through the MSNBCs and the CNNs that then go, oh, from Politico, like there's some valid organization. No, they came out of nowhere from funding from the quote unquote deep state intel communities and narrative managers. What are the next things that kind of need to be done to dismantle these narrative managements? Because that's another executive order that I'm not quite clear on, like with the cartels. All right, you signed this executive order saying that the government's no longer going to be involved in narrative management free speech. That censorship, I don't believe that. Are we repealing the Smith-Mundt Act? Are we getting into signature reduction in the intel community there? Are we having those hearings? Probably not. We know that former intel officers are littered in, you know, Facebook, X still, Google, etc. So what does that executive order mean? And what would you really have to do to kind of take that element of censorship out?
It's a great executive order, but it's very broad. What is going to happen is the executive order and the Trump team's cabinet level carrying that out. they're going to come right up against some big CIA programs. If you're going to do designate cartels as terrorist organizations, which I think is wonderful, well, the CIA is protecting some of those cartels. And some of those cartel kingpins are being protected and run by the CIA. So they're going to come face to face with things like that. It all comes back to what I've been saying for 12 years. Start with looking at the CIA. And I think DOGE is just absolutely magnificent. And the executive orders that Trump has done are absolutely magnificent. What they're going to find is they're coming up against the CIA juggernaut, which they've already experienced with USAID. And there are other programs that the CIA runs and controls. 200 Silicon Valley companies that the CIA helped create. 300 of those Silicon companies have classified contracts, which means they sign CIA secrecy agreements with the threat of prison if they say anything about that program. So the CIA is a monster with huge tentacles, and that's where we need to start. And of course, in Twilight of the Shadow Government, we have 12, it's like a CIA 12-step program. We have 12 recommendations to reform the CIA and to cut out its unbridled power of secrecy and move the National Clandestine Service out of the CIA and into the DEA or as a separate agency to stop this unbelievable CIA reach that it has all over the world. So when you're writing these great executive orders, you're writing them against one of the most powerful, well-funded, global, dark organizations on Earth, and that is the Central Intelligence Agency. So that's going to be a war.
One of the things I want to talk about before we go to break is you kind of hit on a few different things. You talked about Afghanistan. We've talked about U.S. aid. We've talked about cartels. Again, one of the things that has come out is essentially how we were protecting those opium fields and then the export of them. And again, a lot of that payment came through USAID. And if people don't remember, Hamid Karzai was our guy that we put in the beginning. It just so happened that his brother Waleed ended up being the #1 opium drug lord for some time until one of his own guys assassinated him. And I would imagine that guy who didn't make it out of there alive had some pressure from maybe some of the intel community. Who knows? But certainly there seemed to be an incestuous relationship with all the things we're talking about there. So again, we're not just talking about Iran-Contra and South American cartels from the 80s, early 90s. We're talking about post-war on terror. Can you get into that a little bit?
Yeah, I got some personal knowledge of that. I was the program manager in charge of Karzai's protective detail. And selecting the members that'll be on his protective detail, and they were very close to him and went everywhere he went. And Karzai was taking big bags of U.S. cash. What the CIA does is dump a bunch of cash on these people and buy them to do what the CIA wants. And the CIA has been responsible for the creation of several terrorist organizations, Al-Qaeda and ISIS, for example. So the CIA dumped a bunch of money, pallets of money, into the Karzai administration, and Karzai in turn took bags of cash and gave it to the warlords and to some of these terrorist groups to try to make them his buddies too. And the whole operation went absolutely corrupt. And that's what happens. The CIA never learns. They dump our tax dollars to the tune of millions without our knowledge into terrorist organizations, Syria, the Free Syrian Army being an example, and they always fail. They backfire every single time. And because the CIA is what it is, they keep doing it again and again and again, despite these gross failures.
We're going to take a break. That's probably going to bring us into 9/11 on the other side. Again, I want to dream big. I want the documents. We were promised them on Fox News. There's even talk about the Epstein stuff. I certainly want to get into that. And then I want to get into the broader aspects of what's going down in the Middle East via foreign policy. We're going to come back with Kevin Shipp. It's Making Sense of the Madness.
I I couldn't give anything a higher endorsement.
I would be remiss had I not include Cardio Miracle on my very short list of secrets.
It's the real deal. It's a real product. It's not another supplement.
I'm operating about 6 to 8 hours, and I've noticed that being on this Cardio Miracle has made a huge difference.
Since I started taking Cardio Miracle about 8 months into it, the benefits have been fantastic.
You know, if I get hungry, then I just have a Cardio Miracle.
Not only is it safe, but it's necessary to take Cardio Miracle to stay well.
This let me sleep, feeling with more energy, more get up and go, and it's all because of what this company does.
For me as a doctor, Cardio Miracle is a staple.
Cardio Miracle to me is hope in a glass.
To try Cardio Miracle for yourself and get a special fan discount, go to the host page right now and click the link for Cardio Miracle.
And we are back. So let's get into the big boy for me, 9/11. That's really where I decided to care about the geopolitical arena, when I realized we'd been lied to on a large scale. Recently, Kurt Weldon, who held the hearings on Able Danger, went on Jimmy Dore, and he said he's talking with the administration and that things are really going to be coming out. Anthony Schaefer, who was a part of Able Danger, then confirmed that on his own social media pages. You know, I'm skeptical again that we would get anything and everything. I think there's a lot on that bone. If I had believed like he was going to sign that executive order day one, or we were really going to get it, I would have been campaigning door to door. Our entire foreign and domestic policy is based around the narrative that we were sold on that event, and there are just so many issues and problems with that narrative. Just on the hijackers alone and their connection to, again, the intel community, military bases, programs, et cetera, as I'm sure you're aware. So what do you think about the idea of, after these first rung of documents, them going into the Iran-Contras and essentially the 9/11s? I mean, does it really end there? Does it go to the Iraq War? Where does it cut off? Because we're still very much involved in the Middle East in many ways.
Yeah. I mean, one corrupt scandal at a time. And you mentioned 9/11. To my knowledge, I think I'm the only former documented CIA officer that has come out and said that 9/11 was not a bunch of terrorists flying planes into buildings. It was an inside job. And there's more evidence for that than there is for a bunch of terrorists flying planes into buildings. As a matter of fact, the 9/11 Commission report, its findings and summary were written even before they started the investigation. There's and in the book, Kent Heckenlively, my courageous co-author, and I, one of the things I uncovered was Buzzy Krongard, the XO under George Tenet. And it was Buzzy Krongard who tried to go after me when I worked with State to do a secret investigation into something that CIA was covering up. Buzzy Krongard, through Alex Brown's and Sons, the bank that he owned, they put what are called put options on United Airlines, American Airlines stock just days before the planes hit the tower. Buzzy Krongard did himself. And a put option is when you plan on a catastrophic event happening and that stock plummeting. And the CIA XO, Buzzy Krongard, did that and then profited highly off of that. And Buzzy Krongard always makes this statement, being the narcissist that he is, well, I came over from being a wealthy Wall Street businessman to work for the CIA for just $1 an hour because I want to be a patriot. No. When this happened with Alex Brown's and Sons, and they were doing these put options with apparent knowledge of the attacks, Buzzy Krongard left with a parachute of $71 million from his involvement with that. And there's other things that I mean, there's probably 100 inconsistencies with the 9/11 report, 100. And the CIA has so got control of the mainstream media, they will not let any of them do a real investigation into 9/11, as you know. And that's part of Mockingbird, which is a whole nother program. I call it Mockingbird 2.0. But the government and the CIA, you remember the doctrine of plausible denial, the National Security Council Directive 10-2 of 1948, gave the CIA complete power and authority to engage in open covert operations, assassinations, propaganda, economic warfare, bombings, and the rest of it. Gave the CIA full authority to do that under the veil of secrecy, as long as the administration, the White House, and the U.S. government had plausible deniability. In other words, we didn't know anything about that. And I remember being in the CIA, that term was thrown around all the time, plausible deniability. And that is a CIA doctrine to not just deny any involvement in that, but to put out propaganda. Sometimes that is absolutely ridiculous, but if it's repeated enough, the American people believe it. For example, one of the planes hit the World Trade Center tower, exploded in a huge fireball, destroyed the floor above and beneath, incinerated everything, and yet the investigators found the passport of one of the terrorists on board, proving that it was the terrorists. How stupid can you be and still breathe?
Well, let me just
the only
stop
thing that
you.
survived that.
So I mean, first of all, when you look at the physical evidence, especially regarding the hijackers, that one, of course, is the one that went throughout the media and people actually believed. But then when you actually looked at Flight 93 and the supposed wreckage site there, I don't know.
Wreckage.
Well, again, they presented where's the wreckage? But then you had identification of the hijackers. But then the big one, I don't know if you remember this, they actually had a folded red bandana that they said that was worn by these and I'm thinking to myself, okay, so they're in the middle of this suicide mission wearing the bandana. Where's the head? Where's the blood? Where's the body? Dirt?
Yeah.
The thing was in pristine condition. There's, again, 9/11 is the big one. And one of the things that, aside from all the issues there, I mean, we get into Building 7. Actually, Rudy Giuliani came on the program, and I got him to talk about how Michael Hess had been blown up in Building 7 with Barry Jennings. He towed the line on whether, I'll say this, when he said they were leaving, he said no one died or very little people died. Look, they stepped over dead bodies. Barry Jennings gave us the interview. People definitely died in Building 7. But he talked about the CIA being in there, and he talked about all the documents, and he talked about the sniper's nests after the fact. And after the show, I asked him, I go, you don't think they demoed that building? And he goes, listen, I don't, because of all the documents. He goes, but if they wanted to destroy a bunch of stuff, maybe they did. And he goes, after what's been done to me, I'm open to all the conspiracies. And on the air, he said, let's declassify all the documents. Okay. The question is, what is all the documents and what can we do? We had E-4B planes up in the air running drills that day that just happened to be on the scenes of the attack. They're on video in D.C. Everybody acknowledges that now. Even CNN did a report years and years ago. But the same type of plane is in New York on the scene of the second attack. You can see it in plain sight. It's there before then. So is there any chance of getting the information on who's on those E-4Bs, et cetera, what kind of drills? We know, for instance, another big thing, when the NRO documents came out, they were running drills all the way through after United 93 with phantoms, AKA fake hijacked planes. And I have the audio, I've put it out there. It was 20 minutes after that in Cheyenne Mountain, they shut those drills down. That's
correct.
Yeah, I mean, they literally fought hijackings all over the place that morning, probably 20 to 50 of them, and the public isn't aware of that either.
Yeah. I was a federal investigator and I taught criminal investigations. There was no criminal investigation done on 9/11. Immediately, they called it a terrorist attack. And what that did was that shut down any criminal investigation. As a matter of fact, all the metal from the buildings was shipped out to China the next day. And that was evidence. Some of the melted girders and things were evidence of what what happened to them and what caused them to melt like that? Well, they were put on a boat to China and shipped out the next day. That's criminal evidence. So and the 9/11 Commission is just absolutely ludicrous. It's like the Warren Commission, which was headed up by JFK's worst enemy, who we fired, Allen Dulles, the director of the CIA, ran the Warren Commission. I mean, these people get away with these things as ridiculous as it seems. There is more evidence that 9/11 was an inside job than there is that it was conducted by terrorists, 3 of which who are still alive.
Oh, you think that 3 of them really did survive?
They are. Yeah, they've been interviewed.
So now let's get into actual policy. I mentioned the fact that our entire foreign policy, at least, and a lot of our domestic policy, again, you go through the Patriot Act, Military Commissions Act, National Defense Authorization Act, the legitimization of Guantanamo Bay again, Abu Ghraib. The list goes on and on and on. Homeland Security, fusion centers, all of that is based on the narrative surrounding 9/11. And now,
right.
And especially being in Iraq, Afghanistan, the Middle East, the war on terror as a whole. And now we're in a position for the first time. I mean, Israel's been kind of saying it. Netanyahu and the brass in charge ever since October 7th. The 2-state solution's totally off the table. With Trump saying it, in the past 48 hours that they're taking Gaza and Palestine's over and they're going to resettle these people. And they're talking to Egypt, Jordan, and Saudi Arabia, and we're going to work something out. That puts a nail in the coffin. All right. How it plays out from here, I don't know how violent it's going to be. I don't know where they're going. I don't know what Israel does with Iran and Lebanon, if they see this as an opportunity to expand even further, as they've, said they want to in the past. What are your thoughts there? Because obviously I think this is all a bad move, but at the same time I see Trump's perspective. He has the, deniability of not being in office when it pops off. And now, by the time he's in office, he's not wrong. Gaza's done. It's done. I mean, there's just nothing there. So where does it go from here? And what does that mean for us in the Middle East and around the world? Does that leave us open to quote unquote blowback, larger scale escalation, et cetera?
Well, in terms of Gaza, we have to remember the ruling party or the ruling government was Hamas. And for decades, Hamas has, as part of their platform, called for the complete annihilation of Israel. You can't have a 2-state solution when one of the states wants to absolutely annihilate the other right across the border. Not going to work. It's never going to work. And that's never the right solution. You're just giving Hamas the ability to rebuild its tunnel and rebuild its terrorist structure. They run by ideology, and that a global Islamic caliphate of which Israel stands in the way as an enemy. So Gaza is done. Whether Trump and the Israelis should go in and clean out Gaza, frankly, I think Gaza does need to be cleaned out and rebuilt as a non-terrorist state, and let the Palestinians come in and live in better conditions than they did before. But there's no other solution that's going to work. If you let the Gazians move in there with Hamas, they're just going to be targeting Israel again, which has been one of the stupidest things our State Department has done since I was in the Counterterrorism Center, just ignoring the fact that Hamas's primary platform was the annihilation of Israel. So I thought about that and went, Trump, what in the world are you thinking? And then I thought, no, going back to my Counterterrorism Center days, and what I know about Hamas and the terrorist organizations in Gaza, there's no other way. There's no other way to bring peace to that area, to scrub that Hamas and its connections out of there, find a good way to protect the Palestinian people and build them homes and things that are nice and have a bustling economy. That would be a great solution. So I don't think that personally that's knowing what I know about Hamas and Gaza. I don't think that's necessarily a bad idea.
We're going to take one last break. When we come back, I want to talk about even more expansionism in the Middle East. Syria fell in a rather rapid fashion after long intelligence intervention. And you look at who they put in charge there. Again, one of these ex-Al-Qaeda, al-Nusra guys that was in U.S. custody, just happens to find al-Baghdadi and get a boatload of money. And in the fashion, I would assume, again, you have Western intelligence that really pushed that last football over the goalposts. Let's put it that way, folks. So what does that mean for Syria? And, Israel was already given the Golan Heights. Is that part of the expansion of that area? And again, is there the possibility of blowback? Final segment with Kevin Shipp. Go get the book right now. It is Twilight of the Shadow Government, How Transparency Will Kill the Deep State. Back with the final segment of the show after this.
What do a neurosurgeon, a country artist, and a television and radio host have in common? They all saw the writing on the wall. Big banks sharing your financial information with big government. Join them as owners in Old Glory Bank, the pro-America online bank that protects your privacy, security, and liberty. Invest today at own.oldglorybank.com.
I couldn't give anything a higher endorsement.
I would be remiss had I not include Cardio Miracle on my very short list of secrets.
It's the real deal. It's a real product. It's not another supplement.
I'm operating about 6 to 8 hours, and I've noticed that being on this Cardio Miracle has made a huge difference.
Since I started taking Cardio Miracle about 8 months into it, the benefits have been fantastic.
If I get hungry, then I just have a Cardio Miracle.
Not only is it safe, but it's necessary to take Cardio Miracle to stay well.
This let me sleep. It's showing up more energy, more get up and go. And it's all because of what this company does.
For me as a doctor, Cardio Miracle is a staple.
Cardio Miracle to me is hope in a glass.
To try Cardio Miracle for yourself and get a special fan discount, go to the host page right now and click the link for Cardio Miracle.
And we are back. So let's talk about the rest of the Middle East. I just talked about Syria, Assad gone in rapid fashion. Obviously, when you push into the likes of Syria, you're kind of even poking the Russian bear a little bit. Iran also, heavily aligned with Russia. I don't count Israel out from doing something just insane there. What is the outlook of the rest of the Middle East under this administration with this decision, especially if, quote unquote, clearing out Gaza means more fighting?
Well, you got to look at it this way. These groups, the radical Islamic organizations, Hamas, Hezbollah, et cetera, Iran, they don't want peace. They'll never want peace. There's going to be blowback even if we do nothing. I mean, they have Death to America Day once a year. So to be worried about blowback, I think, is just a complete waste of time, because they have every intention of doing blowback, whether we do something or not. What we're doing is we are holding that off and holding what they want is a global Islamic caliphate, and they'll die for that. And so we don't need to be worried about blowback. That just stands in the way of actually addressing the problem directly. Now, the Free Syrian Army, which just took over Syria, was trained and funded by, guess who? The CIA. And I know who one of those operatives is. There's a picture of him in a ISIS truck. I know exactly who he is. I'm not going to say his name here because I try not to do that. But the CIA caused that overfall, and the Free Syrian Army, claiming to be moderates, believe in a global caliphate, and after Syria, the rest of the world. So that's how that happened. There's going to be blowback, but we have to face that if we want to end this problem in a permanent, or at least a close to permanent way. we've got to accept the fact there is going to be blowback. The Muslim world, except for good countries like Indonesia and other Muslim countries that are democracies, but the radical Islamic countries want the end and destruction of Israel and the United States, period. They've stated that. It's in their charter. They're public about that. So in stopping them, we're really protecting our national security, and that needs to continue. Ukraine is another example. John Brennan made secret trips into Ukraine along with Victoria Nuland, the queen of the deep state, and helped stage that coup, unseating a democratically elected president and putting their puppet Zelensky in place. And look what the CIA has done. Put us face to face against Russia on the verge of World War III. 1 million young men, soldiers have been killed. And here we go again, in the coup that the CIA instigated. There's no way that we can address this except with bold moves, which I think that's a great thing I like about Trump is he's bold. But you know, sometimes he can be a bull in a china shop, and you got to kind of keep an eye on that. But what he's been doing in the first 100 days is like, somebody pinch me, I think I'm dreaming. And his purging of the CIA and the shadow government, taking the clearances from some of the biggest nefarious figures, John Brennan, who started the Russia collusion hoax and leaked false intelligence, claiming it was intelligence. John Brennan, who helped start the coup in Ukraine and put us on the verge of World War III. And then James Clapper, who lied under oath to the Senate about NSA warrantless spying on American citizens, both of which are now mockingbirds on CNN and MSNBC. Well, not only did he remove their clearance, he blocked them from going back into any intelligence buildings. My goodness gracious, I couldn't have dreamed of anything better. So a lot of really good things are happening. And as someone who knows and sees how corrupt and expansive the CIA is, seeing these kinds of first attacks or first operations to reform the CIA and these executive orders is extremely encouraging. But take that with concern that the CIA is a monster. It's a multi-layered monster. They're going to try to stop the CIA in the Directorate of Operations, National Clandestine Service. They're going to try to stop John Ratcliffe at every turn because they are deep, they are well-funded, they do not believe in the U.S. Constitution, and they're going to try to stop every move the Trump administration tries to reform them. But these executive orders and what Ratcliffe is doing is a really encouraging step that they're taking that I have not seen in my lifetime.
What do you think about these preemptive pardons that happened in the twilight of the dementia administration? Do they hold up in court? Because they set a terrible precedent, whether you love Grandpa Joe or not. And I would argue they are extremely dangerous to pardon somebody blanketly for crimes they have never been charged with.
Yeah, when you accept a pardon, you're accepting guilt for having done that. The first thing. So they're accepting, yeah, they did it. They're guilty. They'll take the pardon, first of all. Second of all, these pardons are not as protective as people think they are. You can pardon somebody, but if they've committed documented treason, pardon or no pardon, you can come back and start a new investigation without question. So Biden is not totally protected. Anthony Fauci, he can be reinvestigated for other crimes. So these sweeping pardons, they're an attempt to conceal. The end game for Biden is to conceal his role in all of this, and in Burisma and all of the corrupt dealings with China that he was involved in. By pardoning all these people, he's also essentially trying to pardon himself without making it glaringly obvious. But as I understand it, and as I have researched, these pardons do not stop investigation and indictment of these people completely.
What would you like to leave the audience with? How can they get the book, and how can they support your work?
Thank you. Twilight of the Shadow Government was written as a mission. Only a couple of other CIA officers have done this, but because they blacked out the information that I wrote in From the Company of Shadows, unclassified information about CIA criminal activity, I knew they were going to do this to Twilight of the Shadow Government. So I let the CIA sit on it for 3 months. I knew they were going to redact most or all of the information in the book or stop the book completely. So I gave the CIA 3 months, and then I published it anyway. And I did that as a mission for the American people to know what the CIA is. And if you see behind me, there's a picture of it. Let me see if I could. If you see behind me, there's a picture of an avalanche. And one of the last sentences in the chapter at the end of Twilight of the Shadow Government is, we're calling for an avalanche of demand of the American people for reform of the CIA and the removal of this unbridled power of secrecy that it has. So I would say to people, number one, do not fear the CIA. I hear this all the time. If I stand up against the CIA, they're going to come after me. No, they're not. That's why I'm doing what I do. I'm kind of like the lamb at a gyro feast. I'm taking the point on this one. I believe that's what I'm called to do. The CIA will probably come and take the royalties from me, from the book Skyhorse and Kent, thank God, get to keep theirs. The CIA will probably take my royalties. That's not why I wrote the book. I wrote the book to show the American people what the CIA is and start an avalanche of demand through their congressmen and senators, many of which are in the CIA's pocket, to reform the CIA once and for all. That time has come.
Well, there's a couple good ones out there. Thomas Massey, probably the best. Kevin Shipp.
Yeah.
Oh, I like him a lot. Kevin Shipp, thank you so much. Thank you guys for watching this show on this network 5 days a week where the truth lives. Remember, to me, it is not about left or right. It is always about right and wrong. I love you guys, and we will see you on the flip side.
I couldn't give anything a higher endorsement.
I would be remiss had I not include Cardio Miracle on my very short list of secrets.
It's the real deal. It's a real product. It's not another supplement.
I'm operating about 6 to 8 hours, and I've noticed that being on this Cardio Miracle has made a huge difference.
Since I started taking Cardio Miracle about 8 months into it, the benefits have been fantastic.
You know, if I get hungry, then I just have a Cardio Miracle.
Not only is it safe, but it's necessary to take Cardio Miracle to stay well.
This let me sleep, it's showing up more energy, more get up and go, and it's all because of what this company does.
For me as a doctor, Cardio Miracle is a staple.
Cardio Miracle to me is hope in a glass.
To try Cardio Miracle for yourself and get a special fan discount, go to the host page right now and click the link for Cardio Miracle.